What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I figured we were going to try something a little bit different tonight. In all the years I've been doing this show, 4 years, I believe at this point, we have done a ton of Superflex dynasty drafts. We have never done just a Superflex home league redraft draft. It's come up in a lot of the charity tournaments, but never just one of these August shows with Superflex. And I was asking Austin and Josh, why haven't we done that? Let's try something new tonight. So we are going to be talking Superflex in a 10-team league on today's mock draft. The draft room is full. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. We were going to have a guest, and we still may have a guest, but right now it's just me and you, Austin. How you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good, although I see we are already getting roasted in the chat for...
Joe Ortiz, man. I haven't seen him in the chat for a while. I'm just going to throw him up right now. This is my clock right here. He tells me when we are not on time, and he's giving me a hard time about starting the show a minute late because I was explaining the show sheet to you.
So. Yeah, I mean, Joe, we're friends here, okay? We like to chat a little bit before. Sometimes that means we start a couple minutes late.
We got Joe in the listener league this year too, so that should be fun. So.
Oh, that's perfect. But no, I'm doing good. I'm excited to get into a mock draft and just excited that we're getting so close to football. I'm starting to sense the season coming more and more, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the Atlanta Braves have long had no chance to make it to the playoffs this year. It's totally irrelevant from the actual calendar.
Hey, you and I are battling it out for second place in the fantasy baseball league right now. I think it's Dave McKay came in and stole it from us in the champion or in the top of the league there, like by a lot now.
Well, I mean, hey, there's still a month and a half left, but honestly, if it comes down to second, you can have it. I finished second last year, and I'm like going to be disappointed if I just finish second again.
I see everybody in the chat. We appreciate all you guys. I think most of you guys are in this draft with us. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and just get this draft up on the screen. Austin, you know what? I'm actually going to get it started just so we can make sure we're not wasting any more of Joe's precious time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start draft as I explain the settings. For this Superflex mock draft, we went 10-team Superflex tonight. We're going to talk a little bit more about Superflex. But as always, while I can't guarantee we're going to talk about every team, and we probably won't, I'd like to get a shout out to our drafters right when this whole thing starts. So we got Vince Mapstone picking from the 1. Austin went with the 2 tonight. Quita picking from the 3. Gator Jay, who may be our guest, may show up a little bit later. He's picking from the 4. Our good buddy Hoove at the 5. Joe is at the 6. Jacob Lundy at the 7. Weak Knee at the 8. Caesar's at the 9. And Andrea at the 10. So many familiar faces. We appreciate you guys. But as I mentioned, Austin, I want to get this thing started. I did a couple of things with this draft. So it is Superflex, and we're going to start there. But I also did what I'm calling many flex. I only made 1 required of every position and then more flex spots than you would normally see. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on after we get into this draft a little bit. But Austin, I wanted to start with the Superflex, and I wanted to ask you, why do you think it is so prevalent in Dynasty, but none of that has ever really carried over to redraft? Is it just because Dynasty is way more niche than we're giving it credit to in the grand scheme of fantasy football?
I think it's partially that, but I think it's also partially the fact that the people that are playing Dynasty are just so diehard in general. Like they are willing to play fantasy football year round. And when you're doing that, I think you are automatically also going to be in the category of people who are getting into different types of formats as well. I also think my guess is probably that a bunch of people got into Dynasty leagues and they drafted some quarterback at 25 years old, probably somebody named, I don't know, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, one of those guys that it's just like, once you have them and you realize they're a star, you never worry about quarterback. And then it's like, well, now I never worry about quarterback. What's the fun in that? It kind of actually starts to become boring, quote unquote, in some way at the quarterback position, because you just don't worry about it for like 12, 15 years. And having the Superflex and Dynasty shakes it up more because there's enough turnover at the quarterback position in the league but the second quarterback then isn't more intriguing in those dynasty leagues. Whereas redraft, you're getting a new team every year. And so you don't have to worry about that. You get the new flavor every time. If you miss out on Josh Allen, that's the other thing in dynasty. If you miss out on a Josh Allen, you missed out on Josh Allen. You're never getting a chance at getting Josh Allen. There's like almost no way to be able to draft or to get him, trade for him at that point. And so it's like, well, I want to have two quarterbacks to play with then, so I can maybe have different ways to get my roster. Maybe I can compete with a Josh Allen team because they don't have a good second quarterback. But again, in redraft, every year you get a chance to get the elite quarterbacks or that quarterback that outshines ADP. And so for that reason, I think it is often stuck to that single quarterback format.
I think that's a super logical way of looking at it, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying. But I also wonder, so the way I was going to go with this is me and you are obviously heavy in the dynasty community. And so you feel like dynasties everywhere, but the vast majority of fantasy players are coming back in August, having not looked at anything in there. They're pulling out their magazines, they're getting on their websites, and this is when they start to care. And I think I think there's a thing where we overcredit how many people even know what Superflex is or means. As someone who works customer service in fantasy football, I will get questions about my league is adding a quarterback to the flex spot. They don't know to call it Superflex. And I want to use another example. The guest we had on last week, Dan Metzger, big into football, big into fantasy football. Doesn't play a lot of dynasty. I actually got, I think, him in his second dynasty last year. Dan hates Superflex. And Austin, I want to give you his reason, and maybe you can give him a hard time, or maybe you'll agree with him. Dan thinks that Superflex takes too much away from fantasy to real football. He wants fantasy football to feel a little bit more like real football. And in no way, shape, or form is anybody starting two quarterbacks in real football. So like for him, Superflex is a line too far because he doesn't think you should be relying on two quarterbacks. Now, I will point out my home league is a 14-team league, and I know that's the league Dan's been in the longest. So I don't know if that has jaded him because quarterbacks already get a little scarce in that league. And now you're talking about starting two. So that was never going to work for him. But that has very much been his hardline stance for as long as I've known him, is that nobody starts two quarterbacks in real football. Why are we talking about it in fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really funny thing that comes up when we start talking about like making it relevant to real football. And I do the same thing because I also feel that the same way. Like part of the appeal of fantasy football to me is you get to mimic what it would be like to manage a real life team. And so making it more similar to real NFL is something that I look for in my leagues as well. Like I include an IDP component in my home league. I've tried to tried to get rid of kickers, which is flies in the face of that same thing. And so it's real football. Yeah, exactly. And so there's this funny little game. A lot of people say, "Oh, I want to keep it like real football," but what does that actually mean to each individual person is like so different, right?
Yeah. And to Dan's credit, Austin, while you make your pick here, he has been steadfast in we have to keep kickers and we have to keep team defenses. Now, Dan has also been pro adding IDP components to our home league. But yeah, it's there. You can be of two minds where I want to keep it like real football, but fuck those kickers, right?
But I bet that league only gives 4 points for quarterback passing touchdowns, and arguably it should be 6 if it's like real football, right? It's like all of these different things. We don't do offensive linemen typically unless you're on that PFF all 22 bandwagon, which I don't know if they're even still doing that.
I forgot they started that. That was a while ago. I can't imagine that's still going on. If so, it has the worst marketing team in history.
So it is a funny thing like that we like often come back to like this idea of like keeping it like real football. And I do appeal to that as well. And it's part of why I do get a little tired of Superflex as well, because I'm like, to me, it's not even just I don't know, in some ways it like makes quarterbacks appropriately valued. And because like if you were to redo the NFL draft,
it's all quarterbacks.
It's going to all be quarterbacks. And that's what a Superflex draft does. At the same rate, it's like, okay, but like in terms of really what, I don't know, there's something mindset wise where I'm like, I don't like having to take two quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds. I think that's the thing that it comes down to me, for me, is that I guess the other way of saying this is I'm not really good at Superflex leagues. I struggle in Superflex leagues a lot because I have a hard time figuring out how much to value that second quarterback versus getting those elite receivers and elite running backs. And I feel like it does make things way more challenging. And so there's an appeal to it for that. And I think that's another reason why it hasn't taken off and become the dominant way, is people that are playing fantasy football, just focusing on it from August to January, like they're maybe not necessarily looking for the most intense format. They're looking for what it's going to be fun to me. And for most people, it's being able to know you can get a solid receiver or running back early and still land a solid quarterback.
Yeah. For those who have never watched Maka Like It's Hot before, we will talk about the draft just here in a little bit. I like to let at least the first 3 rounds go, and then we will recap the entire first 3 rounds. And I think we'll probably talk a little Superflex strategy when we do that recap, Austin. I do want to wrap up this part of the conversation, though, with I was very intentional about how I set this league up and it being a 10-team league. And the reason I wanted to do 10-team Superflex is basically to fly in the face of what you and I have been saying for 60 days now. I just did the 8-team mock 3 weeks ago. You weren't on that show. We've done so many 10-team mocks. And all we do is laugh and joke about how we can wait until the 14th round to take a quarterback because somehow Baker Mayfield didn't go in a draft or Trevor Lawrence didn't go in a draft. And so, Austin, where I wanted to go with this point is, for folks who are out there who are in established 8 and 10-team leagues, that would be where I would say maybe consider the Superflex just to add a little bit of interest to the quarterback spot, because it's exactly what you said. Superflex essentially makes quarterbacks more appropriately priced. And in an 8 and a 10-team league, it certainly does that, because you go from your quarterback being one of your last 5 picks to being 2 of your first 5 picks. And I personally, in those smaller leagues, and I will never hate on the smaller leagues, I just think it fixes the value on something that can widely be viewed as broken.
So I will play the devil's advocate on that, because on the one hand, I agree with you that in an 8-team league, having 2 quarterbacks is a good way to bring more quarterbacks into the playing field and make more of them relevant. But then aren't you just creating the same problem, but for your second quarterback? Like, you're going to spend an early round pick on your first quarterback, and then you could just wait until round 16 to get your second quarterback and probably just as fine, because
so all you've done is shift the draft 1 round.
Exactly. Like, it's like what we talked about on the quarterback ranking show, where like quarterbacks 8 through 16 are basically the same dude.
Player.
And so like you just end up, exactly like you said, you have your first round where it's like, okay, we'll get your elite, your number 1 quarterback, and then do the rest of your draft the way you typically would, and then come back to it later. I think 10 is a better balance for it, because there's enough depth where it's like, okay, actually I do care about getting that receiver or that running back early on. But yeah, I just, for me, like in redraft, I will tend to skew towards 1 quarterback leagues. It just, to me, feels more original to the game. And but if you're trying to bring in more players to the game and that's part of your goal, like I definitely see putting the Superflex in there.
I think it's completely fair. I'll be honest, Austin, I've never been invited to play in a redraft Superflex league that wasn't one of these charity leagues.
Yeah.
Every home league I've ever been invited to, because I have my league that's going on its 20th year now, but I'm in 4 like local leagues to Northeast Ohio. Not one has been Superflex. And the other part of that is, of those 48 to 50 other managers that I play fantasy football with, Austin, I don't think 25 of them know what Superflex is. And I don't say this to be insulting. I say this to say it's probably, as we're hosting a show that I hope people watch, it's probably way more niche than we who do this all year long. And I can say this to our chat because they've been watching us literally all year long. We're degenerates. We don't think the way that other people think. Like I would ask our chat, Andrea, you're in an 8-team league right now. We talked about it a few weeks ago. How many people in that league, Andrea, probably even know what Superflex is? If you're still with us, drop it in the comments. And if you're just someone watching the show right now, how many local Superflex leagues do you play in? Like, let us know, because I don't know that they exist, Austin. And that kind of, like I said, shoots in the foot our viewership here.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I totally get that. Like the leagues that I play in that are redraft, they're often like they're work leagues or they're with different friend groups of mine, and it's just like that's not the point of that is not to like have these interesting formats. The point of that is to have something to relate to each other on. It's like it's the community aspect of fantasy football. And so I think that's part of it. And that's where like people that get really into it, it's like, okay, well, at some point I'm going to get bored of having one quarterback, two running backs, two receivers, a tight end, a flat. Like it does get repetitive after a while, especially if you're someone who's big into best ball. And it's like, okay, well, like it's the same, it's a very similar roster build every time. There's a different component that makes it interesting, but then it's like, okay, well, at some point I might want a different league format. So I think it depends on the target audience and their reason for joining the league. And I agree. I feel like redraft will probably always lean more redraft because of
5 seconds, my friend. Go ahead and make your pick real quick while I let the chat know. Oh, you got it. Okay. Andrea says, like I said, Andrea was the first person to chime in that she plays in an 8 team and they don't. They don't in that league. Caesar says 0 local leagues, and that's kind of where I think we're going to come in. Austin, before we transition into the draft, I wanted to throw a couple of quick comments up. First of all, Andrea, who's just been ingrained in this show for the last month, and I am so upset that her draft is next Friday and she cannot join the listener league draft, but she's also first in her fantasy baseball league. So look at us out here in Club Fantasy, just surrounding ourselves with the right people.
Sounds like Andrea needs to join our Discord and teach us how to play fantasy baseball.
Andrea's in the Discord. Yeah, let's get you active in the fantasy baseball chat that's going on, where it's really just me and Austin giving each other a hard time. Joe says he traded away Josh Allen in a dynasty league and got a haul. Austin, I remember I felt like people were way too low on Josh Allen in my first ever dynasty league, which was with the Fantasy Footballers writers. And I got him way later in the draft than I should have. I'm talking like last pick of the first round of the rookie draft. Like I don't remember exactly the thought process behind it, but people let him fall to me. I've held on to him ever since. I don't know, Austin, that I would have the courage to trade Josh Allen away in a Superflex.
I don't either. I mean, I have a Superflex league where I am I'm struggling at running back going into the season. I'm very nervous about my running back situation. And I have Josh Allen in that league. A funny thing, it's an 8-team dynasty league. I have Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And wow. I'm like, I could probably
I don't think we've ever talked about that league on the show. That's an interesting one. We might need to add that to the mock draft list next year.
Oh yeah. And I am just at this point where it's like, well, what would I do to get, I also have Justin Jefferson. It's a stacked roster, except for running back. And it's like, what would I do? And I do not have the guts to trade away Josh Allen in that league.
Yeah, that's fair. Austin, let's get into this draft before I get yelled at. We are 18 minutes into the show. We're just into the draft. It happens sometimes. I like to recap the first 3 rounds. I might even go first 4 rounds here because there's some interesting picks. So, Austin, let's talk about the first 4 rounds of this draft. It is a 10-team Superflex draft. From the 1 spot, we got Jamar Chase. Then we go Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, the quarterback run. CeeDee Lamb, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Bijan Robinson, and Weekney was not on auto yet when that pick was made. I think he went on auto on the next pick. But Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Hurts wraps up round 1. Andrea grabbed Jalen Hurts. She backs it up with Jahmyr Gibbs. Then we got Saquon Barkley, Malik Neighbors, Baker Mayfield, Christian McCaffrey, Nico Collins, the 2 tight ends, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride get bookended by Ashton Genty. And then the round wraps up with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown's manager sticks with his wide receiver strategy and goes Puka Nacua in the 3rd round, Brian Thomas Jr., Devon Achane, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Ladd McConkey, Josh Jacobs, Drake London, Bo Nix, and A.J. Brown wraps up round 3. And Austin, I feel like I've been saying names for way too long. So you guys can see the rest of the names on the screen, or if you ever want to look, you can jump into our mock drafts afterward and see where they're going. But I'm going to stop at round 3 just like I always do because I just don't want to sit here and list names off. Austin, right away, what I want to talk about is the order of the quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson is the thumbnail. Somehow, he is the 3rd quarterback off the board. We got you taking Josh Allen. We got Wego taking Jaden Daniels, and we got Jay taking Lamar Jackson. This is, I guess, the early version of keep trade cut, Austin. This was not the plan. But Josh Allen at 1, Lamar Jackson at 3, Jaden Daniels going ahead of Lamar Jackson. How do we feel about that?
Well, what's fascinating about this is Kita Huego was on auto pick at the time, and I believe Jaden Daniels was auto picked there. And so I don't really totally understand how sleeper ADP has Jaden Daniels ahead of Lamar Jackson. So I would be surprised by this, but the thing is, it's happening. Like there are moments where Jaden Daniels is going as the QB1 in drafts this year. People are very big on him this year. I am still very much in the Allen Jackson being 1 and 2 state of mind. I don't really care who goes first between those two. It's kind of a coin flip. I feel like they're both like on par with each other. But to me, I'm not ready to crown Jaden Daniels ahead of either of those two just because I want to see it for a second season. That's it. We've had this happen where the rookies do have a really good season and then they regress in the next year. And I think if there's a guy that kind of proved it in a way that he's not going to regress in year 2, it probably is Jaden Daniels, but I still want to see it before I'm willing to take that pick as early as it is there.
That's I agree wholeheartedly. I'd mentioned on our quarterback ranking show that Jaden Daniels was my QB1 for a large portion of this season. And I recently bumped him down to 3 for Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And I know you have a pick you're going to make here in just a moment. But normally I'll have you break down your team early on. But since Lamar Jackson is the thumbnail, why Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson? I don't think you need a ton of explanation there, but give it a try.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the sheer number of years that Josh Allen has been the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football, not even just like the potential number 1. He literally in the past 5 seasons has been the number 1 overall quarterback in 3 of them. And the 2 that he wasn't, he was the second best quarterback overall. Lamar Jackson, it's been a little bit more up and down than that at times. He's often been elite, but he has had those years where he gets hurt or where he struggles and he falls outside of the top 5. I think it's unlikely he does that this year, but also he had a historic year last year in terms of passing touchdowns with 41. He is the type of quarterback he can repeat that, but I do feel like it is going to likely regress a little bit. Whereas Josh Allen actually had kind of a down season in some ways in terms of passing touchdowns. He only had 28 over the course of time where he's been averaging as either the QB1 or QB2. He's had three of those 5 seasons where he had 35 or more passing touchdowns. So
yeah,
if you just take that into account, a little bit of regression for both of those guys in the opposite directions, Josh Allen then to me still stands out as the QB1, just given his longer sustained performance as the best quarterback in fantasy football.
I think it's perfect. We'll talk about a couple more of these early round picks, Austin. While you're making your pick, I want to toot my own horn a little bit. Philly Mike jumps in the chat, throws NFL trivia, who has the most 20 sack seasons. And so I had some time while you were talking. I guessed Reggie White. He told me no. I searched my brain banks, Austin, and I figured it was Deacon Jones, the man who most people would credit as the all-time sack leader in NFL history. But he was making sacks before they actually invented the term QB sack. And so Mike congratulated me, told me I was the man, wanted to know how I know. I'm old and I hear a lot of shit when I watch football. So that's just really what it comes down to. Deacon Jones, shout out to the Deacon. That was a fun one. Austin, let's jump to the tight ends. Let's talk about the guys that we always talk about early in these drafts. Even in a super flex draft, and Austin, we're just going to talk about your whole team apparently. It's going to be a little bit of a different show. Even in a super flex draft, these 2 guys, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, going in the first 2 rounds, not a surprise to you, obviously, as you took one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's a lot of upside for those guys, and it's really like laying the claim to that positional advantage really early on. And I think if it's going to be any tight ends going in the first 2 rounds, it's going to be Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. I do think you can still get really good value at tight end later on, like getting George Kittle in the 4th round. I'm not mad about that. Same with Sam Laporte at the 5th round. The fact that Travis Kelce is on the board still also great value there. I feel really good about him having a bounce back season.
Yeah.
But I think even in the Superflex format, you're going to see this happen because people are going to feel like they can get more players at the receiver and running back position. There's just more depth there than tight end, and there is going to continue to be that. Maybe if you were in an 8-team setup, then you would be in a place where suddenly tight end falls a little bit because people feel like maybe there's 8 tight ends that are going to be production worthy. But once you get to that 10 team, it didn't.
No, they didn't. I think Bauer still went at the turn, even in the 8 team. I could be speaking incorrectly, but I think he did.
Wow. Well, that didn't happen there.
I was gonna say, I brought this up though, Austin, because I said even in an 8 team, I think those 2 still provide that weird positional advantage. And in an 8 team, if there's anything I've learned from you, Austin, is you got to find the edge when you're in a quote unquote weird league. Usually me and you are talking about enormous DFS tournaments where you're looking for the edge. This is the exact opposite. It's a tiny league and there's not a lot of edge. And so an early tight end, if you truly believe McBride and Bowers can repeat, they provide you that edge where you need that in an 18.
Yeah, I know. I think that's actually a really good point. The more we talk about it, because too, the other thing about these 8-team leagues, if you're playing on like a standard ESPN format, you have 2 running backs and 2 receivers. And when you have 2 receivers, like you're probably going to have 2 pretty good receivers in an 8-team league. And you'll probably even have a decent flex player. But the tight end is where it can get really, really weird really quickly. Like, I mean, there was so many years where like only 3 to 5 tight ends were even worth it, and even tight ends 3 through 5 were kind of met compared to like the guys like Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski back in the day, those guys. And so definitely, I definitely agree with that. Like even in those smaller formats, you need to find different ways to get that advantage. And that's also why guys like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson will go early in those leagues, is because there's a meaningful difference between QB1 and QB5.
Yeah.
And when you're in those 8-team leagues, it's harder to make up ground if you're losing it in those positions.
I'm going to ask you if any of these picks stand out to you in these first 3 rounds. If they don't, there are 2 players I want to talk to you about not going in these rounds, even in this 8-team format, that I feel like we need to talk about. But do any of these picks stand out to you in those first 30 picks?
Yeah, I think probably the only one that I would say stands out is taking 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. And that's a little bit of a quirk about the way you set up this draft, where outside of quarterback, you only need 1 running back and 1 receiver.
So I was going to bring that up in the next section, but please keep going, because Jay seems to be the only one who built a team that plays to that format. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, like I'm slowly becoming converted to the Joel Worth school of fantasy football, where I just don't really.
I've noticed that recently. You've been leaning so heavily into 0 RB in our mocks. So shout out to Joel Worth for just fully winning Austin Amendolia over.
Yeah, and the problem is for me, like it's this interesting conundrum where I think I fought with Josh recently about whether to go like robust RB or to go 0 RB up front. And it's this interesting thing where I feel like in some ways you kind of have to do one or the other. It's hard to play this game where you're doing an anchor RB strategy, because it's just like the dead zone for running back. I feel like there are like multiple different dead zones where I'm like, I don't really want any of these guys. And so if you don't time getting your running backs well, I feel like it just pushes me to go longer and longer without getting another running back. And it's because of that in this league, I guess, like in some ways, like the Juego going at the 3 spot, like getting 2 running backs early on, doesn't have to worry about it anymore. Like that can work out in this kind of format.
It's almost like your quarterback spot in a best ball, where you're just like, I'll start these 2 guys at running back all season and then never have to worry about it. So
yeah, and like maybe that's the way to go in this, but it's just with only having to go one running back and the injury risk with so many of these guys, it makes me want to just go ahead and like see like, okay, how far can I wait actually for this 1 running back? And having David Montgomery be my 1 running back, I'm like, I'm not mad about that.
Yeah.
And so now I'll just focus on high upside guys everywhere else.
I want to throw Shadow as Wicked up, because their question actually plays into one of the players I was going to ask about. Austin, I was a little interested in the fact that Derrick Henry and Kieran Williams both fall to the 4th round. Williams, I'm going to be blunt, less so. Nobody seems to love him the way I do, so I kind of get it. But that brings up Shadow as Wicked's keeper question. They can spend an 8th to keep Kieran Williams, or they can spend a 10th to keep Brock Bowers. And immediately I'm like, it's Brock Bowers. However, Austin, they also play by the Austin rule. And all of their wide receiver spots are tight end spots. They do not have a dedicated tight end spot. So I don't know if that actually lessens Bowers' value, because I think Bowers is probably still a top 10 wide receiver. So you can keep a top 10 wide receiver in the 10th or a top 12 running back in the 8th. I think I'm still probably keeping Bowers, but it is interesting that this is the most mock it like it's hot question ever from a person who I don't know has ever commented before. Welcome. Shadow is Wicked. Throw us a like on and subscribe on this video. But anyway, I love Kyron. I love Brock Bowers. And this league uses your rules, Austin.
Yeah, I was gonna say, congrats for picking the ideal way to play fantasy football and the actual solution for the tight end conundrum. Because this is the whole reason that I love the receiver flex position to begin with, is because Brock Bowers is still an advantage to have in that spot. I would much rather have Brock Bowers in my flex position, in that receiver flex position, than even receivers that are going to go off the board here shortly. Like, I would rather have him than Deebo Samuel, than Khalil Shakir, than Jaden Reed. Like, those are the type of guys that would potentially be in that receiver flex otherwise. And I definitely would rather have Brock Bowers still than Dalton Kincaid, Tucker Kraft, etc. So to me, it is still Brock Bowers. Like, the advantage there is so high, because also the way like he is featured in that offense and in a PPR format, he's going to really outperform Kyron Williams, I think, especially because Williams, like, he's not that active in the pass game. He's just reliant on scoring touchdowns. Yeah, exactly. And so I would still go Brock Bowers, especially because it's only 2 additional rounds after Kyron Williams. Like, also, frankly, you could probably still get Kyron Williams at a pretty cheap value.
Well, right? As like, that was proven in this draft, Kyron Williams goes off as the 38th overall pick. So.
And that's like the way I tend to think about keepers is, how do I end up?
Yeah.
How do I end? Like, what am I going to have to pay in the draft to get this player? If you don't keep Brock Bowers, you're going to have to spend a first or second round pick to get him. If you don't keep Kyron Williams, he might fall to the 4th or 5th round. You don't know.
Exactly. No, such a great point. And Austin, I think that perfectly leads into the next set of questions I was going to ask. The draft's going to fall off the board here, folks. I'm going to leave these early picks up for you guys for eye candy. We will get back to talking about the draft. And at the end of this, Austin's going to break down his entire draft. I'll probably pick a team to break down. I'm probably going to break down Vince's auto draft team because I think there's some interestingness with that. But Austin and I are also going to try to pick a team that we like the most out of this group, just to make one of you very happy and the other 9 of you very mad. But Austin, where I wanted to go with this was the other league setting that I put on this league. And that is what I'm referring to as many flex. And so I had it where you only had to start one of every position. You alluded to this earlier, one of every position, and then everything else is flex spots to kind of open things up. And as I mentioned, what I noticed is Jay, until the 9th round, was the only person really building for this. Though you brought up a very interesting point about Juego's team, and that is they can just alternate between Genty and HN, and then start all of their wide receivers, though they're probably not going to do that. They're probably going to play both of those guys because they spent such early draft capital on them. But regardless, Jay grabbed one wide receiver knowing he only had to start one wide receiver, and he kind of did the opposite of what you and Joel Worth would do, and he is loading up on running backs. So, Austin, the next thing I just kind of wanted to ask was, how do you feel about getting rid of so many required positions? Maybe not getting rid of them entirely, because you know my thoughts on that, but getting rid of some of the required positions, breaking it down to where it's only one, and then kind of leaning into the flex plays.
Yeah, I think there are trade-offs with it for sure. I mean, like you alluded to, if you just went full send, all flex, it does start to take away the positional value. And so it causes, there's some downstream effects of that. Namely, that there is no trade value at that point.
I told you that's been the part that's bothered me the most. So
that's the toughest part of that. And I think even in this format, you start to move towards that in some ways, because you're going to have your elite guys, and you're going to just start them every week. I think I'm honestly, like, part of me is like having a hard time wrapping my head around it, because I'm looking at it. I'm like trying to I'm like tipping my head as like, what does this actually mean for my strategy? Like, in some ways, I think it just means that, like, whatever your favorite position is, you're probably just going to spam it, right? And you're going to like focus on that aspect of it. And we kind of see that, like, the contrast between Jay's team and my team is very, very prominent. Like, he's very in on the running backs. But I guess what I would say is what it does, it like creates something more balanced between an all flex league and a more traditional league, in that in an all flex league, the way that you end up drafting, like, largely is based on projected points at that point, because you're just trying to take whoever the best player is, regardless of position. This makes it a little bit more interesting. You have to still like value each position to some degree. I think me like having David Montgomery as my RB1 is actually would actually probably hurt me in this league because I'm competing against people that have Breece Hall, Ashton Genty, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Jameer Gibbs.
Yeah, you're really the only player in the entire league with a questionable RB1.
Right. And so like it actually like in some ways it in a weird way, I think it increases the value of that running back one in a way that if you have to start 2 running backs, you may not. I think that as I'm like processing this out loud, I think that is the biggest change and one of the potential appeals of this type of format is I do think it actually maybe right sizes the value of running back to the way it used to be.
Interesting.
Where having a running back early was so valuable. Whereas in more quote unquote modern formats, you have 3 receiver positions that you're focusing on. And so it makes a lot of sense to spend your first 3 draft picks on receivers so that you're just like set at that position. And that's where 0 RB is born. You can start someone like you can have Brian Thomas, Marvin Harrison, and Garrett Wilson all on a team. It's like, that's a pretty great receiving room. And I can just make it up later. But this actually right sizes it in a way that I think is a little bit interesting and unique from some of the other formats that try and like solve the running back problem.
Yeah, for those following along on YouTube, I did scroll the draft a little bit. So that is round 3 that is at the very top right now. That is not round 1. We didn't skip the 20 most important players in this entire draft. I'll probably scroll again here in a little bit. Austin, I want to talk about some controversial players, and man, are they controversial, unfortunately, for the exact same reason. But one's a lot more recent. So I hate to put you on the spot like this. And I know we don't always talk about this kind of shit right now on this show, but I feel like we would be doing people a disservice if we didn't mention how we are handling Quinshon Judkins and Mixon right now. These are 2 players that as of recently, we have you and I think agreed on this on our running back ranking show. Judkins for a second was off my draft board completely. Now we need to talk about how to handle him, though he still hasn't signed a contract. And Joe Mixon, who obviously has a shady ass past himself, there was actually a huge fight on Twitter today about people claiming whether or not he should be off of draft boards based on rumbles of injuries, and people didn't like the use of hearing rumblings, and Twitter is just a cesspool as it's always been. But Austin, like I said, I don't want to dwell on how terrible of people they are or probably are. But what I do want to dwell on is how are you handling them for the sake of fantasy drafts with the injury concerns with Joe Mixon and the contract and character concerns with Quinshon Judkins? Are these guys that there's no way you're drafting them?
I mean, so there's the never-ending caveat that it's like draft players that you are going to enjoy pulling for.
We've talked about that for years.
Fun, like do that. Because of that, will probably not draft really either of these guys. However, in terms of fantasy value, what I would say is, given the latest update I saw on the Quinshon Judkins situation is that there were not charges being pressed, or that the charges were dismissed.
Dismiss all charges, correct.
And so that, I think, given the way the NFL tends to handle these things, likely means that there's not a suspension looming for him if and when he does sign a contract. That if and when is an interesting question. The issue is that also Isaiah Bond just also signed with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, with the Cleveland Browns, they can't help themselves.
And there was also some similar stories.
Oh, his was I'm not going to get into it because this is not the show for it. His were far worse, but also dropped. So innocent until proven guilty. So
yes. So, similar category of character concerns, and yet the Cleveland Browns just signed him
immediately
with the drug charges
the day after the charges were dropped.
So it would not surprise me if they take the same tact with Quinshon Judkins. Now he's got to get up to speed. He hasn't been at practice, and so I wouldn't immediately put him into a top 30 ranking. But from a fantasy perspective, he's potentially on draft boards, I would say. Now, I'm not drafting him because I like to have fun, but I think if you are looking for someone that's a potential value, that's an option. For Joe Mixon, I think he's probably he's not necessarily off my board, but he would have to fall really far
Yeah,
to be on my board.
I hadn't heard, like, I'll be honest, I try to keep my ear to the pavement. I had not heard about these concerns with Mixon. I started to notice, like, they were really pushing back his start date and they didn't know when he was going to start. And, like, to me, it just felt like veteran shit, but apparently it's way worse than what I heard. I do want to quickly, Caesar is a friend of the show. Caesar, this was in no way, shape, or means a shot at you for taking Judkins. That's not where we were going for. Honestly, I'm glad you did, because you're taking him is what reminded me. Your guys' draft, when people joke that we don't pay enough attention to the draft, your draft is why I ask the questions I do. I look at the draft while Austin is talking and try to come up with my next question. So, yeah. Austin, along those same lines, maybe just a quick thing, because you took one of these guys. Well, I guess you didn't take one, but you took someone who was influenced by it. What about the wide receivers that are in similar situations? You got Rashee Rice. Now the suspensions kind of push back. You got Brandon Ayuk, who they're saying may not play until week 6. And that's the happy, the optimistic view. So,
yeah. And for that, it really just depends. It depends for me on, like, the specific situation. So for a guy like Rashee Rice, again, pick players that you want to pull for. But he is not coming back from he is coming back from an injury, I guess, but he's already playing. He's already participating in training camp. Yeah. And so he's getting to ramp up right now. And so for that, I am more likely to draft him, because the reason that he would not be starting games is for suspension, not for an injury.
Okay.
Whereas Brandon Ayuk, like, even when he comes back in week 16, or week 6.
You may be right.
Potentially in week 6, week 7, even when he comes back, he's still going to be getting ramped up to full speed even at that point, because we know coming off of serious injuries, particularly serious injuries in the leg and the knee and with those ligaments, like, it takes time to get back up to full speed and to be able to cut confidently, which is going to be so vital for a receiver. Because of that, I am more likely to not draft Brandon Ayuk unless he really falls in value. And at that point too, I'm kind of like, should he be drafted in redraft leagues where there's a waiver wire? Like, should it just be like a later in the season type move? Because I think he could sit on your bench for probably 8 or 9 weeks, if not 10 weeks. And maybe he, like, starts to pop off in the playoffs. And so, like, maybe around that week 10, I'm looking at adding him to a roster. But I worry about that type of situation where it's like, not only are you going to miss time, but you're missing time because you're still not healthy. And then you're going to have to ramp up to full NFL speed.
Perfect. Before we jump into the mid-round recap, and Austin, I'm going to do what I always do as you're making your last pick here. I have rounds 5 through the end of the draft showing on the screen right now. I'll just have you kind of scan these while I'm asking this question and see if any of these picks stand out to you. I'll come up with a few players myself. We obviously talked about Judkins already. But I did want to throw up this question because it is a Superflex question. Would we want to pick Burrow, Hurts, or Chase in the 4th pick of a Superflex? It is a 12-man league. It is 4-point passing touchdowns, and they are assuming that Lamar, Allen, and Daniels will be gone already. So this is the first. It's almost like the 3 quarterbacks who went at the start of this round. They're going already. So he has to choose: does he go quarterback, Austin, or does he grab Jamar Chase, who, if you did not catch the beginning of the draft, is it Pareko? Sorry if I'm butchering your screen name there. Jamar Chase was the first pick of this draft ahead of those quarterbacks, Austin. And then Burrow. Hurts falls all the way to 10, which could just be great value on Hurts. But Austin, you're the 4th pick. The elite quarterbacks are gone. Do you go with the next tier, or do you go with the first tier at wide receiver?
Yeah, well, I think it is. I will say, to me, it is either immediately between Hurts or Chase. Very much because of the 4-point passing touchdown aspect of this. If it was 6-point passing touchdown, then I start considering Joe Burrow. But
I agree.
Joe Burrow had just such a wild season last year, nearly passed for 5,000 yards and had 43 touchdowns. He's never done that, even as good as he is. And so I would look towards Jalen Hurts over Burrow for that reason, because also Jalen Hurts had kind of a low season in terms of passing touchdown. And we've talked about this many times with the Philadelphia Eagles. They got ahead and they ran the heck out of the ball in the second half of games. I think that's going to be different. I think Jalen Hurts will still score a bunch of rushing touchdowns, but I could easily see him having some more passing touchdowns. This is frankly, part of the thing that I struggle with in Superflex leagues is
Yeah,
making this very decision is when do I pick the quarterback or the receiver? I think in this case, I will probably go with Jalen Hurts, only because I feel two things. One, I feel it is really important to have an elite quarterback in Superflex leagues. That has
yeah.
been like the thing that I have landed on as like a must have for me. And to me, Jamar Chase is another really good regression candidate. 1,700 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns last year. That is really hard to repeat in consecutive years. He could still be really good. Like he was the wide receiver 5 in 2021 by only quote unquote 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns. But that is still like if you look at their scoring in those 2 seasons, comparing his 2 best fantasy football seasons, it's 100-point drop. He scored 403 PPR points last year, had 302 last year. And so I do think that tier difference is meaningful. I will say I see the new comment that says only problem is I hate the Eagles. Definitely pick Jamar Chase then. I am very much like, you know what? I'm with you.
We
I also
actually
hate the Eagles.
Well, we also mentioned this not 5 lines ago in the show, Pareko. It was probably right when you were coming in. Draft players you can root for. If you cannot root for Jalen Hurts, take Jamar Chase.
This is like when I play fantasy baseball. There's no way in hell I'm drafting anybody from the Philadelphia Phillies because bump that.
There you go. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with Bryson Stott, Nick Castellanos, and Victor Scott on my team.
Yeah, it's probably working for you too, honestly.
The Victor Scott trade. I won't say I'm regretting it, but he has been worthless. But that's not for this show. I want to quickly throw Jacob Lundy on the screen. Said he hadn't mocked with us in a while. We're glad to have you back, Jacob. And he said the last pick was for me, Austin. Jacob Lundy's last pick was Cole fucking Kmet. So if you've never watched an episode of Mocking Like It's Hot, I am a full-blown Cole Kmet hater. Was for many, many years. And now with Colston Level in there, it feels like punching down, which is not something I would do. Austin, let's talk about the middle of this draft before we start getting into the recaps, because we're basically to that point of the show already. So when you look at this draft from round 5 on, we kind of already talked about, the controversial picks. Did any other picks stand out to you?
Yeah, I would say Chuba Hubbard is a good one.
Yeah.
Making it to the 6th round. Maybe that's the nature of this being only start one running back. But I am really big on Chuba Hubbard this year. I know I was listening to I think the Athletic Football Show doing their camp reports, and they talked about how like Rico Dowdle is getting involved. But you know what? They also mentioned that Chuba Hubbard, like low key, it was done in passing. It was like apparently Chuba Hubbard's like out with the jug machine, like catching 1,000 passes after practice every day. And so it seems like he's trying to make sure he's also got the receiving chops built in, so he doesn't, because that would be the thing. That would be the way that somebody could compete with him in that backfield, is to have those receiving chops built up. And so because of that, and just like I like him in general, especially in what I think is going to continue to be a run heavy Carolina Panthers offense, like going in the 6th round, that feels like a little bit a lot to me. Now, I wouldn't maybe necessarily put him ahead of Kenneth Walker, but I would consider him over Alvin Kamara, James Cook, and Travion Henderson.
Yeah, as someone who covers the Panthers for Football Guys, I think the drumbeat that people created for Rico Dowdle, I don't think people realize how much it has died in Carolina, because all I am hearing is Chuba Hubbard, Chuba Hubbard, Chuba Hubbard. And I mentioned this on our running back show, and Trevor Etienne is pushing Rico Dowdle for that 2 spot already. Yeah. And what that tells me is it doesn't mean they're both very close to Chuba Hubbard. It means Chuba Hubbard is very ahead of Rico Dowdle. So.
Well, there's that, but also don't forget, I told people to draft Trevor Etienne.
You've been about Etienne. There's no denying that. Yeah.
But yeah. So Chuba Hubbard is the one that stands out to me there. I guess, Terry McLaurin, like I was going to say, like, you could say he fell a little bit behind Ted McMillan, but also like, not really. Like he's in a pretty good spot still, going ahead of guys like DJ Moore, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, even with the contract stuff going on there. So, in these middle rounds, maybe not too much. I guess the other one would be probably Travis Hunter ahead of Devonta Smith, actually, now that I look at it a second
Oh my
longer.
God, Austin, you've never done this before, but let's play a game of keep, trade, cut. Austin, I was calling this the big draft hype wide receivers. And so I want you to keep, trade, cut. And I thought their ADP would be closer. It is wild how far ahead Tet McMillan went from this group. But I wanted you to keep, trade, cut Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter, this year's big rookies, and Xavier Worthy, the big rookie from last year with the landing spot that everybody loves. So keep, trade, cut Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter, and Xavier Worthy.
Dang, it's a good thing you threw Xavier Worthy in there, because if you had thrown any other of the rookie receivers in there, you would have had me out here standing Tet McMillan after I originally was like down on Tet McMillan.
Yeah.
This is a tough one because I think Xavier Worthy, he had a really good end to the season last year, and I felt like coming into this year he had a chance to take a step forward. So I will say I'm gonna keep Tet McMillan. I'm going to cut Travis Hunter, or no, I'm going to trade Travis Hunter.
Yeah,
and cut Xavier Worthy.
Interesting.
And here's why. I feel like Xavier Worthy, the reason he was so effective from a fantasy perspective down the stretch, in part, was because there was no Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown never really got going last year, and Travis Kelce had a down year.
Yeah.
I think Rashee Rice, he will likely miss some time with the suspension, but when he's on the field, I think it's going to take away from Xavier Worthy's role. I think Hollywood Brown should be more up to speed this year, and Travis Kelce should have a bounce back year. And so it's just going to be harder, I think, for Xavier Worthy to shine in that offense as compared to where it was last year. Travis Hunter is just a trade value because there's so much hype there, but I don't want him on my roster because I know that the camp reports have been like he's spending a lot of time on offense in training camp right now. I personally think that's because there's more to learn for him on offense than there is on defense, because on defense, they're probably just going to stick him in man coverage. And the point is going to be know who your man is and stay on him. Absolutely. Whereas on offense, he has to learn like a full route tree and he has to learn a new offensive scheme. I think it's just going to be a different setup. And so they need him to be up to speed on that. But it wouldn't shock me if they only played him like 50% of offensive snaps and deployed him as a chess piece on the offensive side of the ball. And so he doesn't get the level of impact that you would expect. And
yeah, because that's what a lot of people are saying right now is they don't know how career longevity. Everybody is saying for 1 year, maybe 2 years, this is going to be fun. But at some point, they think he's going to have to change because of the abuse he'll take. So
yeah, exactly. And then so lastly, I like that leaves me with keeping Tet McMillan, and it's because he will be the number one. Now I'm a little worried. Like, I don't know how much much upside I think he has within that role, even because it's just the Panthers, and I'm not convinced they're going to be an elite offense. But he should have the volume that would keep him at least in the top 24, and I think he should be probably pushing like top 15 at receiver.
For me, it would be very similar to yours. It's crazy that we're both cutting Worthy after what we saw from him to end last year, but I would flip the two. I would keep Travis Hunter just because I'm the optimist. I love Tetairoa McMillan. It's hilarious that I'm saying I would trade him. But what's funny is, Austin, I don't know that Tetairoa McMillan has the trade value. I'd probably trade Worthy and cut Tetairoa McMillan, but then I'd immediately re-sign him. It's what I'd have to do. But I think I'd keep Hunter just because of the enigma, Austin. Like, we don't know. This kid was the second pick of the draft. And so I would keep Hunter. I would trade Worthy because I don't think my guy Tetairoa McMillan has the trade value, despite him going wildly earlier in this draft than the other two, because their ADP was pretty close. Austin, let's get into a recap here, or we are never going to get into a recap. It's funny, the show with just me and you, we're spending so much more time talking about everything else. Austin, you know the rules at this point. Talk to me about the players you want to talk about. Don't talk about the ones you didn't, but if you had a strategy, did it work out? Did it not work out?
Yeah, I mean, my strategy has been like hitting click at the right time a lot of times during this month, because when we don't have a guest, there's a lot more multitasking that happens.
There is.
My strategy tends to be get two quarterbacks within the first 3 to 5 rounds. If I can get both of my quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds, I will. But honestly, I didn't really feel comfortable taking somebody like Bo Nix at the 2-9. So I get Josh Allen and Justin Herbert early. I feel like Herbert, like he has the potential to have a really like solid season, bounce back from where he has been in recent years. I kind of just like on a whim was like, yeah, sure, I'll go with elite tight end as well.
Yeah.
And then from there, my strategy was I wanted to test the waters and see like, okay, what does this look like when I, wait at running back? And I think I've been doing this a lot in the mock drafts because I have been trying to test how bad it can get in so many different ways. And this time I ended up waiting for David Montgomery, and I'm like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And what I do love is my receiver room because I feel like a lot of these guys have a really good upside and can potentially end up being top 20 receivers over like individually. A lot of them can be like Devontae Adams. I think in the Rams is going to be really good this year. Having Jameson Williams.
That's what I was going to say. The guys you got later, super interesting.
Yeah, I love Roma Dunze as a potential backup, especially like not having Keenan Allen there, one less receiver to feed. And absolutely. I do feel like Caleb Williams and him can have a good connection this year. I love Jacoby Myers this season in general. So like I love my receiver room, which is probably good because my running back situation probably leaves something to be desired.
But at least in a league like this, you'd probably be able to package and trade if you felt like you needed to at a point. So
yeah, that's very true. Like if we got to a point where it was like Garrett Wilson has had a really good start to the season, but I don't trust the Jets.
Yeah.
To sustain that, then maybe I will make a trade for some running back at that point and bet on him fading.
Austin, I'm going to pop Vince's team up here. We don't normally talk about the auto draft teams, but I want to share a behind the scenes story for folks. I try to start filling this draft up around noon every day. And Andrea actually had to remind me today because she's better at this than I am. And for years, Austin, I have fretted about having this draft be full every time we do this draft. A few weeks ago, Joe Zolo and I did a draft where only he and I drafted. We made every other pick be auto picks. And the show went so damn smooth. And I'm not saying this one didn't go smooth. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But like I've started to worry less about auto picks. But someone in the chat also pointed out that Vince Mapstone's team for an auto draft turned out so well. And I guess this is easy to do from the one spot in a 10 team. But what I wanted to point out to folks is let's not freak out too much about overdrafts. I worked in banking for way too long. Auto drafts. But also, Austin, how do we feel about, I believe Vince, now Weak Knee was later, I say Vince being the last one to fill his quarterback room. Weak Knee did it later and actually did it better. So we'll talk about that. But starts off with 3 stud wide receivers. We're talking 3 guys who could all be top 5 at the end of the season. Doable running backs with Breece Hall and Alvin Kamara. And this strategy plays a little bit more into what we were joking about with Kitawego, is that he could just alternate between these two and start the hot hand because of the receivers that he has. But then he gets Jared Goff and CJ Stroud. And I'm actually going to slide over to Weak Knee's team, Austin, because Weak Knee went around later and got Dak Prescott and Jordan Love. And my God, if you just take those 2 quarterbacks and put it on Vince Mapstone's team, that might be a perfect fantasy football team, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely works out. I mean, this comes back to the point that we were talking about earlier, where it's like the sort of super flex aspect of this doesn't necessarily solve the quarterback depth problem. It's still like you can wait a little ways and get those good quarterbacks later on. I will say, I do think because you are starting 2 quarterbacks, like having a more elite guy at one of the quarterback spots would cause some issues here. Like I feel like Justin Herbert is going to match Jared Goff and CJ Stroud most weeks, and Josh Allen is going to outperform them almost every week. And so there's still some things there, but to your point, like those 3 receivers to start off the draft, that is very ridiculous value. It was funny. Earlier in the draft, I mentioned like you could do this and still get 3 quality receivers like Brian Thomas, Marvin Harrison, and Garrett Wilson. And that was when you had.
Oh, your mic just shut off, Austin.
That's when you had the 3rd round at the top of the board.
Yeah.
And then I scrolled up and I was like, oh, wait, somebody actually got Jamar Chase and Monroe St. That example I was trying to give to illustrate the point of how you can get 3 elite receivers early and still have a really good build throughout.
And to Vince's credit and to Joe's credit, Vince was in and out of the draft. Even Jamar Chase was actually not an auto pick, but I just kind of wanted to point that out more about the quarterback thing. Austin, did you have a chance to look over the draft board and pick a favorite team? I did. And if I'll give you a little time because I want to tell my story real quick. Until round 10, my favorite team was going to be Gator Jay. Couldn't make the show, but he picked so many of my favorite players. And then he does this shit with David Njoku, Kyle Pitts, and Isaiah Likely to end his draft and lost me. So I'm going to go all the way, Austin, to pick 10. And my favorite team is Andrea. A lot of my favorite players here did the running back thing right. 3 running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, and then still has so many wide receiver ones, only grabbed 1 tight end, and then was able to wait and get Caleb Williams, someone who I'm higher on than most, as their second quarterback. My favorite team is definitely Team 10, Andrea 59, has a lot of my favorite players and got them at good value.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid team, and was one of the ones that was catching my eye as well. Outside of Andrea and Vince's, I think the one that comes to my mind, which is one you already called out as well, is weak knees getting Bijan Robinson, Malik Neighbors, and Drake London to start off their draft, and then being able to land Dak Prescott and Jordan Love later on. Like, that's a really solid foundation there.
And even got Trevor Lawrence as a third quarterback, which I'm not mad at third quarterbacks in a league like this. So
yeah, I totally agree. And Tucker Kraft in the 10th round, like, that is where I feel comfortable taking Tucker Kraft at this point. Like, he has been getting pushed up.
That's a good team for ADP as well. You're absolutely right.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of that one. In the late round dart throw with Javonte Williams, like, I took Jaden Blue. I did my own little take a dart throw at the Dallas backfield. So I like that as well.
Perfect. Guys, that is going to wrap up this episode of Mock It Like It's Hot. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I always tell you, if not for the chat, not for the drafters, this is an extremely boring show, friends. So we very much appreciate you guys tuning in and drafting with us. Austin, let everybody know what you got going on. I know we're finally seeing Austin on some more content.
Yes, you can check out the Best Ball podcast that Matt Record and I dropped today, where we start breaking down, we're going through all of the Week 17 matchups. It's a way that we can talk about every single team in a really quick and concise way and give our takes on what teams we like to target and what we don't like to target in the best ball drafts, and particularly how we like to target them. So there are some teams where it's like, well, I'm going to have some players from this team, but I don't want to go overboard. And so we talk about how we're navigating that. We did our ranks that was 9 through 16 in this first episode. Next week is 1 through 8. If you watch that episode and you think, oh, we agreed too much about things, just wait. We disagree a lot about our 1 through 8 ranks, and I'm very excited to dig into it with Matt next week.
Austin, let's get out of here on a question. Dynasty was offered CJ Stroud and J-Mo for Justin Herbert and Trey Harris. Which side of this trade are you on?
CJ Stroud and J-Mo Williams. There's no way that J-Mo or Trey Harris is Jameson Williams.
I agree wholeheartedly, and that's exactly the route I would go with this. And I understand this is dynasty and not just 1 year. I think it was you, Austin, or one of the teams we talked about who added Trey Harris. I am so cooled on Trey Harris since Keenan Allen signed. You were just seeing so many stories about Keenan Allen, and who's one of my favorite players, just sliding right back into a groove with Justin Herbert. And again, in Dynasty, that doesn't matter. But I agree. Trey Harris is not J-Mo, plain and simple.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week is the Listener League draft. I believe we're full already, so if you're watching this in one in, I'm sorry. We'll talk about it next year. But that is going to be a live draft. We're doing it just like this show. Austin is drafting. I am drafting. We're doing it live on air. It's going to be a blast. That is 7 days from now, next Friday. And then after that is going to be our last show of the season. We're just going to do a pretty standard home league 12-team draft. It's going to be a very fun way to end the season. We appreciate every single one of you folks for tuning in. Thank you, friends. We will see you next week. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We'll see you at the next mock draft.